Admiral Dae-ho Kim stepped off the transport shuttle and looked around the massive docking bay. The space station was huge beyond anything he had ever seen. Ships from 12 different alien races filled the bay with their strange shapes and bright colors. Some ships looked like giant crystals that sparkled with inner light. Others were smooth and curved like sea creatures from Earth's oceans. A few were so dark they seemed to eat the light around them. Captain Hyojin Park walked beside him carrying a data pad with their presentation. She had worked for months to prepare the numbers and charts that showed what humanity could offer to the galaxy's defense. Behind them came Commander Taemin Lee with 3 junior officers carrying additional equipment. The human delegation was small compared to the other groups they passed in the corridors. The Varaxian delegation took up an entire section of the station. Their ambassador rode on a floating platform surrounded by 20 guards in bright red armor. The Centauri collective had brought what looked like half their government. Even the smaller species had delegations of 50 or more representatives. The humans had brought 7 people total. Dae-ho did not let this bother him. He had served in the Terran fleet for 30 years and learned that numbers did not always tell the whole story. His small team knew their job, and they would do it well. The galaxy would learn what humans could do when it mattered most. The Galactic Council chamber was a circular room with a high dome ceiling. The center held a holographic display that could show star charts and fleet positions. Around the edges were seating areas for each species. The human section was much smaller than the others, but Dae-ho took his seat with confidence. Ambassador Kethmar of the Varaxian Empire stood to address the gathering. He was tall and thin with gray skin that looked like polished stone. His voice was deep and carried easily through the chamber. Fellow members of the Galactic Council, we face uncertain times. Our scouts report strange signals from beyond the galaxy's edge. We must prepare our defenses. Other ambassadors nodded and made sounds of agreement. The Thalassian representative, who looked like a giant octopus in a water suit, waved several tentacles. The ocean worlds agree. We must combine our fleets to face any threat that comes. One by one, each species announced their military contribution. The Varaxians boasted of their 50,000 warships, each one 3 kilometers long, and armed with plasma cannons that could crack moons. The Centauri collective had 75,000 vessels in their defense fleet. Even the peaceful resonants, who preferred trade to war, offered 15,000 crystal ships that could channel stellar energy into devastating beams. When the numbers were added up, the Galactic Defense Fleet would have over 400,000 ships. The alien delegates seemed pleased with their massive armada. Some species clapped their equivalent of hands. Others made chirping or humming sounds of approval. Then all eyes turned to the human section. Dae-ho stood slowly and activated his presentation. A holographic display showed the Terran Federation's fleet positions and ship counts. The Terran Federation offers 847 ships for galactic defense. The chamber fell, silent. Then a low chuckling started from the Varaxian section. Ambassador Kethmar leaned forward on his platform. Did you say 800? Not 800,000? 847 ships. Dae-ho repeated calmly. Each one, crewed by trained professionals who know their duty. The chuckling grew louder and spread to other sections. The Centauri delegate, an insect-like creature with 4 arms, clicked his mandibles in what sounded like laughter. 800 ships against threats that might number in the millions. What do humans think they can accomplish with such a tiny force? Captain Boram Choi sat in the back row of the human section. She was the youngest fleet commander in Terran service at only 28 years old. Her hands clenched into fists as she listened to the aliens mock her people. She had trained her whole life for fleet command and knew the capabilities of human ships better than anyone. These aliens had no idea what they were talking about. A delegate from the Thorian hegemony stood up. The Thorians looked like walking, trees with bark-like skin and branches for arms. Perhaps the humans should focus on supply duties and minor patrol work. Their small fleet could help with cargo runs while the real warships handle actual combat. More laughter filled the chamber. Even species that usually stayed quiet joined in the mockery. The humans were clearly seen as the weak link in the Galactic Alliance. Their tiny contribution was barely worth mentioning compared to the massive fleets of the major powers. Hyojin Park felt her face grow hot with anger but kept her expression calm. She had served alongside some of the finest officers in the galaxy and knew that human crews were second to none. Their ships might be smaller in number, but each one was worth 10 of anything these aliens could build. She looked at Admiral Kim and saw the same controlled anger in his eyes. Ambassador Kethmar gestured grandly with one long arm. Since the human contribution is so limited, perhaps we should assign them to the Outer Rim territories. That region has been quiet for decades. Nothing important ever happens there. It would be perfect for a small patrol force that wants to feel useful without getting in the way of real military operations. The Vraxians' words brought fresh laughter from the assembly. Several delegates made comments about humans being good for light duty and keeping pirates away from trade routes. The insults were delivered with smiles and polite tones, but everyone understood the message. Humans were not considered real military partners. Commander Tae-Min Lee made notes on his datapad as the aliens discussed sector assignments. The Outer Rim territories covered a huge area of space on the galaxy's edge. Most species considered it worthless because it had few valuable resources and no strategic importance. The jump routes through that region were old and rarely used. It was the perfect place to put forces you wanted to forget about. The meeting continued for several more hours as the various species divided up responsibilities and resources. The Vraxians would command the core defense fleet. The Centauri Collective would handle the mid-rim sectors. Other major powers received assignments that matched their contributions and political importance. The humans were given the Outer Rim and told to do their best with what they have. As the assembly broke up, small groups of delegates gathered to discuss private deals and alliances. No one approached the human delegation. A few aliens glanced in their direction and whispered among themselves, but none seemed interested in working with such a weak partner. Daeho gathered his people and headed back toward their transport. The walk through the station corridors was quiet. Other delegates passed them without acknowledgement or gave them looks that mixed pity with amusement. The humans were now officially the least important members of the Galactic Defense Alliance. Back, aboard their ship, the 7 human delegates sat around a small table in the briefing room. The mood was grim but not defeated. These were professional military officers who had faced worse odds before. They knew their worth, even if the aliens did not. Well, that went about as expected, Yijin said as she reviewed her notes. They gave us the assignment nobody else wanted. The Outer Rim covers more space than any other sector, Tae-Min pointed out. If something does come through that region, we'll be the first to know about it. Boram Choi looked up from her tactical display. Let them laugh. When the time comes to fight, they'll see what human ships can really do. Our 847 vessels will show this galaxy something they've never seen before. Daeho nodded approvingly at his young captain's words. The aliens think numbers are everything. They build bigger and bigger ships and count them like treasure, but they don't understand what makes a fleet truly dangerous. It's not the size of your ships or how many you have. It's the skill of your crews and the intelligence of your tactics. The human delegation spent the next few hours planning their deployment to the Outer Rim. They would spread their small fleet across the vast sector and establish patrol routes along the major hyperspace lanes. Their ships were fast and well-equipped for long-range operations. What they lacked in numbers, they would make up for in coverage and response time. As their transport ship prepared to leave the station, Daeho looked back at the massive structure through a viewport. Hundreds of alien ships still filled the docking bays. The combined fleet being assembled would be the largest military force in galactic history. But the Admiral had a feeling that numbers alone would not be enough for what was coming. The galaxy had made its decision about humanity's place in the coming war. They would soon learn if that decision was wise. 3 months passed quietly in the Outer Rim territories. The human fleet had settled into patrol patterns that covered the vast region with surprising efficiency. Captain Boram Choi commanded a squadron of destroyers along the Kepler trade route while other human ships watched the less-traveled hyperspace lanes. Their presence had already reduced pirate activity to almost nothing. The aliens had been right about one thing. The Outer Rim was peaceful. Ancient jump routes carried only occasional merchant traffic. The few inhabited systems were small colonies or research stations. Most of the sector was empty space between distant stars. It seemed like the perfect place to put a military force that nobody expected to do anything important. Communications Officer Jae Sung-yu worked the night shift aboard the monitoring station, Distant Eye. The station hung in empty space halfway between two minor star systems and watched for any unusual activity. For 3 months, Yu had seen nothing but routine merchant ships and the occasional survey vessel. He was starting to think the assignment would be the most boring of his career. Then his instruments detected something that made him sit up straight in his chair. Long-range sensors were picking up massive gravitational disturbances from outside the galaxy. The readings were unlike anything in his database. Whatever was causing them had to be enormous and moving very fast. Yu ran the data through analysis programs and felt his blood go cold. The disturbances were not natural phenomena. They had patterns that suggested artificial construction, ships of incredible size moving in formation. He immediately sent an emergency transmission to Fleet Command. Admiral Dae-ho Kim received the report at his headquarters on the planet New Sol. He read through Yu's data twice before calling his senior staff for an emergency meeting. The numbers were hard to believe. If the readings were accurate, something was approaching the galaxy that dwarfed anything in the known databases. "Are we sure about these sensor readings?" Kim asked, as his officers gathered around the holographic display. The gravitational signatures showed objects that had to be hundreds of kilometers long moving at significant fractions of light speed. "I checked everything 3 times, Captain Hyojin Park replied. She had flown to New Sol as soon as the report came in. "The data is solid. Something big is coming, and it's not from any known civilization." Within hours, similar reports began arriving from deep space monitors throughout the galaxy. Every major power had their own long-range sensors, and they were all detecting the same massive disturbances. Emergency sessions convened on a dozen homeworlds as governments tried to understand what they were facing. The Vraxian High Command called for an immediate council meeting. Ambassador Kethmar's usual arrogance was replaced by barely controlled fear as he addressed the assembly. "Our scientists estimate that whatever approaches has over 1 million vessels, each larger than our biggest dreadnoughts. We are calling them the Devourers based on intercepted transmissions." A Thalassan intelligence officer, her tentacles writhing with anxiety, shared what their spy networks had learned. "The Devourers have consumed 17 galaxies. They strip entire star systems of resources and turn everything into more ships. Their fleets grow stronger with each conquest." The crystalline resonance, who rarely showed emotion, actually flickered with fear patterns as they shared their analysis. "These creatures are not like us. They do not negotiate or trade or make peace. They consume everything in their path and turn it into part of their collective." Lieutenant Yoonji Nam worked frantically at the Terran Strategic Analysis Center on Earth. She had been studying the Devourer transmissions for weeks, and her findings were disturbing. The enemy ships communicated through quantum signals that suggested a hive-mind intelligence. Each ship was part of a larger organism that thought and acted as one. "They're not just invading," she explained to her superior officers. "They're harvesting. Every ship they capture, every planet they consume becomes part of their fleet. They've been growing for thousands of years by absorbing other civilizations." The galactic powers began mobilizing their massive fleets for the largest military operation in known history. Vraxian shipyards worked around the clock to produce additional vessels. The Centauri Collective called up their reserve forces and began moving them toward the galaxy's edge. Every major civilization contributed ships, weapons, and personnel to the combined defense fleet. But there was a problem with the enemy's approach vector. Initial projections showed the Devourers heading straight for the galaxy's core, where the most valuable systems and largest populations were located. The major powers positioned their fleets accordingly, creating defensive lines around the most important worlds. Commander Minho Jong commanded a patrol group near the outer edge of human territory when his sensors detected something unusual. The readings were faint but consistent with the Devourer signatures they had been told to watch for. He ordered his ships to investigate and made a discovery that changed everything. "Admiral, you need to see this," Jong reported during an encrypted transmission to fleet headquarters. "We've found Devourer scout ships in our sector. They're not heading for the core like everyone thought. They're coming through the outer rim." The implications hit Admiral Kim immediately. While the major galactic powers were positioning their fleets to defend the core systems, the real invasion was flanking through the supposedly unimportant outer rim territories. The region that everyone had dismissed as worthless was about to become the most critical battlefield in the galaxy. Captain Yujin Han was leading a reconnaissance mission when she encountered her first Devourer vessel. Her corvette Daegu Swiftblade was fast and well-armed but tiny compared to the enemy ship that dropped out of hyperspace in front of her. The Devourer vessel was a nightmare fusion of different technologies, clearly built from the remains of consumed civilizations. "It's beautiful, in a horrible way," Han reported as she watched the enemy ship through her view screen. "I can see parts from at least 6 different species incorporated into its structure. Vraxian hull plating, Centauri weapon systems, even what looks like resonant crystal formations. They really do absorb everything they defeat." The Devourer ship ignored Han's small corvette and continued toward the inner systems. It was clearly a scout, gathering information about galactic defenses and fleet positions. Han followed at maximum range, documenting everything she could about enemy capabilities and movements. What she discovered was terrifying. The scout was not alone. Long-range sensors detected dozens of similar vessels spread throughout the outer rim, all moving toward the galaxy's inhabited regions. The main invasion force would not be far behind. Commander Hyan Wu Lim coordinated the human response from his flagship, a heavy cruiser called the Incheon Guardian. His tactical display showed Devourer movements throughout human space. The pattern was clear. The enemy was using the outer rim as a staging area for a massive flanking attack. "They're smarter than we thought," Lim reported to Admiral Kim. "While our allies prepare to defend the core systems, the Devourers are positioning themselves to attack from the one direction nobody is watching. They'll hit the major civilizations from behind, while their main fleets are facing the wrong way." The human fleet found itself in an impossible position. Their 847 ships were spread across a sector larger than most civilizations' entire territories. The Devourer advance force numbered in the hundreds of thousands and was growing larger every day as more ships arrived through the outer hyperspace routes. Captain A. Young Baek commanded the science vessel Incheon Explorer and was tasked with gathering intelligence on enemy capabilities. Her ship had the most advanced sensors in the human fleet and could analyze Devourer technology without being detected. What she found made her question whether any force could stop what was coming. "Each Devourer ship is like a mobile factory," she explained during a classified briefing. "They can harvest raw materials from asteroids, moons, even planets and turn them into new vessels or weapons. The fleet we're tracking isn't just moving through our space, it's growing stronger every day." Admiral Kim faced the hardest decision of his career. He could order his small fleet to fall back and join the main galactic defense force. That would leave the outer rim completely undefended and allow the Devourers to establish a massive staging area for their invasion. Or he could stay and fight against impossible odds. Communications Officer Jae Sung-yu monitored transmissions from across the galaxy as Kim made his choice. The major powers were confident in their defensive preparations. Vraxian generals boasted about their impenetrable battle lines. Centauri admirals claimed their combined fleet was invincible. None of them realized the real battle would be fought in the region they had assigned to humanity as an afterthought. "Send a message to all human vessels," Admiral Kim ordered. "We hold the line here. The galaxy doesn't know it yet, but we're their first and last defense against what's coming. Every ship, every crew member, every officer. We stand together." The human fleet began repositioning for the greatest challenge in their species' history. 847 ships against hundreds of thousands. Crews who had been mocked by the galaxy's major powers now held the fate of all civilized life in their hands. They had been given the assignment. The Helix Nebula had been chosen as humanity's primary defensive position for good reasons. The colorful gas clouds provided cover for smaller ships, while the gravitational fields from nearby neutron stars created natural choke points that would force the Devourers to approach in predictable patterns. Admiral Daeho Kim stood on the bridge of his flagship and watched his fleet take positions throughout the nebula. 847 human ships spread across the vast space like scattered stars. To any observer, they looked impossibly small and fragile compared to what was coming. The largest human vessel was barely 300 meters long, while intelligence reports suggested devourer ships measured in kilometers. It was David facing Goliath, but on a scale that involved the fate of entire civilizations. Captain So Young Kang commanded the destroyer Soul's Pride from her position near the nebula's outer edge. Her ship was one of the newest in the human fleet, equipped with experimental weapon systems that had never been tested in real combat. She watched her tactical display as sensor contacts appeared at the edge of her detection range. Contact. Bearing 047, her sensor officer reported. Multiple large objects dropping out of hyperspace. Admiral, they're bigger than anything in our databases. The Devourer fleet emerged from the hyperspace tunnel like a nightmare made real. The first ships were so massive they blocked out entire star fields as they moved. Their hulls were patchwork constructions that showed the remains of dozens of consumed civilizations. Phyraxian armor plating was welded next to Centauri crystal formations and Thalassian biometal structures. Each ship was a graveyard of conquered species. Commander Min Ho Jong led a squadron of frigates from his command ship Busan Runner. His tactical officers counted enemy vessels as they continued to pour out of hyperspace. 50,000 and still coming, one of them reported. Admiral, the final count is over 100,000 ships. Some of them are the size of small moons. Throughout the galaxy, other civilizations monitored the confrontation through quantum communication networks. On the Vraxian homeworld, military commanders watched with a mixture of anticipation and dread. They expected to witness humanity's brave but futile last stand before the real war began. Ambassador Kethamar sat in his command center, surrounded by tactical displays showing the battle zone. The humans chose their death ground well, he commented to his staff officers. They will die with honor at least. When their fleet is destroyed, we will remember their sacrifice. The Centauri Collective's War Council reached similar conclusions as they observed the impossible odds facing the human fleet. Their military analysts estimated the battle would last less than 6 hours. After that, the Devourer fleet would be free to attack the galaxy's core systems from an unexpected direction. Captain Bo Ram Choi positioned her light cruiser Han River between two gas giant moons where the gravitational fields would provide some protection from the massive enemy weapons. She was humanity's youngest fleet commander and had trained her entire life for moments like this. Her crew looked to her for confidence, and she gave it to them despite the fear in her own heart. "Remember your training," she announced over the ship's communication system. "We're not here to trade punches with ships 100 times our size. We're here to be smarter, faster, and more precise than anything they've ever faced. Every shot counts. Every maneuver matters." The first exchange of fire began when the Devourer advance guard entered the nebula's outer regions. Their weapons were as massive as their ships, energy beams that could vaporize asteroids and particle cannons that fired projectiles the size of buildings. The space around the human fleet lit up with the fury of artificial stars. Several human ships took immediate damage as the enemy fire found its targets. The frigate Mokpo Defender lost its forward shield generators and had to fall back behind, a gas cloud for emergency repairs. The corvette Jeju Striker took a glancing hit from a plasma beam and suffered casualties among its crew. To observers throughout the galaxy, it looked like the expected slaughter was beginning. The human ships seemed to barely scratch the massive Devourer vessels with their smaller weapons, while taking devastating damage in return. Alien commanders watching the battle began calculating how long it would take for the remnants of humanity's fleet to be completely destroyed. But something was wrong with their calculations. Despite taking hits, the human ships continued to fight. With increasing effectiveness, their movements became more coordinated and their targeting more precise. What had seemed like random defensive maneuvers began to show patterns that confused the Devourer commanders. Captain Yu-Jin Han demonstrated the first hint of humanity's true capabilities when her corvette Daegu Swiftblade executed a maneuver that should have been impossible for a ship of its size. The small vessel accelerated directly toward a Devourer battleship. weaving between the massive energy beams with precision that seemed almost supernatural. "How are they moving like that?" asked a Vraxian tactical officer as he watched Han's ship dance through the enemy fire. "Their acceleration curves are beyond anything our ships can achieve. It's like their vessels are ignoring physics." Han's corvette reached optimal firing range and launched a spread of quantum torpedoes. The weapons were tiny compared to the massive Devourer ship, no larger than a human fist each. They struck the enemy vessel's hull and seemed to have no effect at all. The alien observers marked it as another futile gesture by the doomed human fleet. Then the Devourer ship's main weapon array suddenly went dark. Its massive plasma cannons stopped firing, and several secondary systems began failing. The quantum torpedoes had not tried to penetrate the ship's armor. They had phased through it and detonated inside critical systems. Commander Hyan Wu Lim coordinated the next phase of the human attack from his heavy cruiser Incheon Guardian. 17 frigates moved in perfect formation through the nebula's gas clouds, their ships communicating through quantum entanglement networks that made them function as a single entity. "Wolfpack formation," Lim announced to his squadron leaders. "Target the command vessel at Grid 77 Alpha. Remember, we don't try to destroy it, we disable it." The frigate squadron attacked the massive Devourer command ship from multiple angles simultaneously. Their weapons were precisely targeted at specific system nodes that had been identified through weeks of intelligence gathering. Power conduits, sensor arrays, navigation systems. Everything needed to coordinate the enemy fleet's movements. Other species watching the battle began to realize they were seeing something unprecedented. The human ships were not fighting like any military force in galactic history. Instead of trying to overpower their enemies, they were dissecting them with surgical precision. Captain A. Young Beck commanded the science vessel Incheon Explorer from her position deep within the nebula's core. Her ship's advanced sensors had been mapping the Devourer fleet's communication network since the battle began. The enemy ships were coordinated by quantum links that connected every vessel to central command nodes. "I've found their weakness," she reported to Admiral Kim. "The Devourers function as a hive mind, but that makes them vulnerable. If we can identify and eliminate the command ships, the rest of their fleet will lose coordination." The revelation changed everything about humanity's battle strategy. Instead of engaging in futile direct combat with superior numbers, the human fleet began targeting the specific vessels that controlled the enemy network. It was like fighting a giant creature by cutting its nervous system. Commander Won-jae Seo led the stealth ships in the most dangerous mission of the battle. His squadron had to penetrate deep into the Devourer formation and eliminate the central command vessels without being detected. Their ships were equipped with experimental cloaking, systems that bent light and sensor beams around their hulls. "Going dark," Seo reported as his ships activated their stealth systems and disappeared from all sensors. To the rest of the galaxy, it looked like several human vessels had simply vanished from the battlefield. Even Admiral Kim lost track of them on his tactical display. The stealth squadron moved through the enemy fleet like ghosts, avoiding the massive ships and their sweeping sensor beams. When they reached the command vessels, grotesque constructions that pulsed with quantum communication arrays, they struck with precision that left the rest of the galaxy speechless. One by one, the Devourer command ships suffered mysterious system failures. Their quantum networks went silent, their coordination protocols collapsed, and their fleet formations began to fall apart. Ships that had moved in perfect unity suddenly found themselves operating independently. Lieutenant Yoon-ji Nam worked frantically at her analysis station aboard Admiral Kim's flagship, tracking the battle's progress through quantum sensors and communication intercepts. What she saw defied everything the galaxy thought it knew about military tactics. "The enemy is losing cohesion," she reported. "Without their command network, individual Devourer ships are reverting to basic programming. They're still dangerous, but they can't coordinate attacks or share targeting information." The tide of battle began to turn as the human fleet exploited their enemies' growing confusion. Ships that had seemed invulnerable when acting in coordination became vulneri. The revelation of humanity's true capabilities spread through the galaxy's command centers like wildfire. What had begun as a hopeless last stand was transforming into something unprecedented. a small fleet systematically dismantling an invasion force that outnumbered them 100-1. The alien observers who had expected to witness humanity's destruction were instead watching the birth of a new kind of warfare. Admiral Daeho Kim studied the tactical displays from his command center as the battle entered its critical phase. His fleet had been fighting for 14 hours, and the results were beyond anything the galaxy thought possible. Over 40,000 Devourer ships had been disabled or destroyed, while human losses remained minimal. The key lay in understanding what made human military doctrine fundamentally different from every other species in known space. Captain Yujin Han pushed her corvette Daegu Swiftblade through another impossible maneuver as she demonstrated the principles that were confusing alien observers throughout the galaxy. Her ship accelerated at rates that should have pulverized her crew, turned in directions that defied conventional physics, and maintained precise targeting while performing acrobatics that made veteran pilots dizzy just watching. "How are they doing that?" demanded a Centauri admiral as he watched Han's ship spiral through a formation of massive Devourer vessels while maintaining perfect fire control. "Their inertial compensators must be operating beyond theoretical limits." The answer lay in humanity's approach to ship design and crew training. While other species built larger and more heavily armored vessels, humans had focused on creating the perfect fusion of organic intelligence and artificial systems. Every human ship was equipped with advanced AI that could predict and respond to threats faster than any biological mind could process. Han's corvette was not just a ship with a human crew. It was a hybrid entity where human intuition guided artificial intelligence in making split-second decisions. The AI predicted enemy targeting patterns while Han's experience told her when to trust the predictions and when to follow her instincts instead. Commander Hyen Woo Lim coordinated his frigate squadron through the same human-AI partnership that was revolutionizing space combat. His 17 ships moved in perfect synchronization because their artificial intelligences were linked through quantum networks that operated faster than thought itself. "Formation Delta 7, Lim commanded, and his squadron instantly shifted into a new attack pattern that surrounded a cluster of Devourer command ships. Each frigate knew exactly where the others would be at any given moment, allowing them to execute maneuvers that looked like telepathic coordination to outside observers. The frigates struck their targets with weapons that seemed impossibly small compared to the massive enemy vessels, but human weapons were designed around the same principle as their ships: precision over power, intelligence over brute force. Each quantum torpedo carried guidance systems that could analyze enemy defenses and adapt their attack patterns in real time. Captain A. Young Bayek worked from her science vessel Incheon Explorer to solve the puzzle that had confused military analysts throughout the galaxy. Her job was to understand how the Devourers coordinated their massive fleets and find ways to disrupt their command systems. "They're not really individual ships," she explained during a secure transmission to Admiral Kim. "Each Devourer vessel is more like a cell in a larger organism. They share information instantaneously and make decisions as a collective. That's how they can coordinate attacks from thousands of ships simultaneously." The discovery explained why traditional military tactics were useless against the Devourers. Most species tried to fight them ship to ship, matching firepower against firepower. But the Devourers did not think like individual units. They fought as a single massive entity that could concentrate overwhelming force at any point. Humans had solved this problem by developing tactics that exploited the enemy's greatest strength and turned it into a weakness. Instead of attacking the Devourer ships, they attacked the network that connected them. Captain Wan Jai-seo's stealth squadron had spent hours identifying and eliminating the specific vessels that served as network nodes for the enemy fleet. "Target acquired," Seo reported as his cloaked ships approached another command vessel. "This one appears to be coordinating movement patterns for the entire northern group. Engaging now." The stealth attack was a masterpiece of precision warfare. Seo's ships fired quantum torpedoes that phased through the massive enemy hull and detonated inside the quantum communication arrays. The explosions were barely visible from the outside, but they severed the neural pathways that connected thousands of Devourer ships to their collective mind. Instantly, an entire section of the enemy fleet lost coordination. Ships that had been moving in perfect formation, suddenly found themselves isolated and confused. Without the collective intelligence to guide them, individual devourer vessels reverted to basic defensive behaviors that made them predictable targets. Commander Minho, Zhang led his squadron of frigates against the now vulnerable enemy ships. "Remember, we don't try to destroy them," he reminded his captains. "We disable their weapons, engines, and sensors. Turn them into floating scrap that can't hurt anyone." The human approach to warfare was as alien to other galactic civilizations as the devourers themselves were. Most species believed in decisive battles where superior firepower determined the outcome. Humans had developed something different, a form of combat that was more like surgery than violence. Captain Boram Choi demonstrated this principle as she led her light cruiser, Han River, against a massive devourer battleship. Instead of trying to punch through the enemy's armor, her weapons targeted specific system nodes that had been identified by intelligence analysis. Power couplings, sensor arrays, weapon control systems. Each shot was precisely placed to cause maximum disruption, with minimum energy expenditure. "Direct hit on Target 7, her weapons officer reported. "Enemy main batteries are offline." "Target 8 destroyed," came another report. "Their maneuvering thrusters are not responding." Within minutes, the massive battleship was drifting helplessly through space. Its hull remained intact, but every system that made it dangerous had been surgically removed by weapons that seemed tiny in comparison. It was like watching a giant fall to precisely placed needle strikes. The alien observers watching from across the galaxy struggled to understand what they were seeing. Military doctrine that had remained unchanged for thousands of years was being rewritten before their eyes by a species they had dismissed as militarily insignificant. "How many ships have the humans lost?" asked a Thalassian fleet commander as he reviewed the battle reports. 23 confirmed destroyed," his intelligence officer replied. "Another 47 have taken damage but remain combat effective." The numbers were impossible to believe. Against an enemy force of over 100,000 ships, humanity had lost less than 3% of their fleet while inflicting casualties that numbered in the tens of thousands. It was not just a military victory. It was a fundamental challenge to everything the galaxy thought it knew about warfare. Lieutenant Yunji Nam analyzed the quantum communication patterns that were revealing the true extent of human success. The Devourer fleet was not just being defeated, it was being systematically dissected by opponents who understood its weaknesses better than it understood itself. "The enemy is attempting to withdraw," she reported to Admiral Kim. "But their command structure is so damaged that most ships are not receiving retreat orders. They're just drifting in space waiting for instructions that will never come." Captain Hyejin Park coordinated the final phase of the battle as human ships moved through the remnants of the Devourer fleet. Her orders were clear: disable everything that could pose a future threat but avoid unnecessary destruction. The goal was not to commit genocide, but to remove the enemy's ability to harm other civilizations. Salvage teams report that Devourer technology includes components from over 30 different species, she informed Admiral Kim. Some of this equipment could be returned to its original owners if they can be identified. The discovery added another layer to the human approach to warfare. While other species sought to destroy their enemies completely, humans were already planning for the aftermath of victory. They were not just better warriors. They were better at understanding what came after the fighting stopped. As the 18th hour of battle approached, the impossible had become reality. The Devourer invasion, force that had terrified the entire galaxy, was broken and scattered throughout the Helix Nebula. Massive ships that had once seemed invincible now drifted powerlessly through space, their crews trapped aboard vessels that no longer responded to commands. Captain So Young Kang surveyed the battlefield from her destroyer Soul's Pride and marveled at what had been accomplished. "Admiral, we've received surrender signals from over 60,000 enemy vessels. The ones that still have communications are requesting terms." The galaxy that had laughed at humanity's tiny armada was about to learn the most important lesson in its history. Size, numbers, and raw power meant nothing compared to intelligence, precision, and the ability to adapt. The species that other civilizations had assigned to the least important sector of space had just saved them all. Admiral Kim Pre, 18 hours after the first Devourer ship had emerged from hyperspace, Admiral Dae-ho Kim stood on the bridge of his flagship and looked out at a battlefield that would be remembered for generations. The Helix Nebula, which had been chosen as humanity's last stand, was now filled with the disabled remnants of what had been the largest invasion force in galactic history. The final count was staggering even to those who had witnessed it firsthand. Of the 107,000 Devourer ships that had entered the battle, over 64,000 were completely disabled and drifting powerless through space. Another 28,000 had been destroyed when their quantum cores destabilized after losing command network connections. The remaining ships had fled back into hyperspace, their collective consciousness shattered beyond repair. Captain Hyejin Park approached her commanding officer with the casualty report that would shock the galaxy. Admiral, final human losses are confirmed. 23 ships destroyed, 47 damaged but operational. Total crew casualties are 812 killed, 2,030 wounded. The numbers seemed impossible to anyone who understood the odds they had faced. Against an enemy that outnumbered them more than 100 to 1, humanity had achieved the most lopsided military victory in recorded history. But the true significance went far beyond mere statistics. Communications Officer Jae Sung-yu was handling transmissions from across the galaxy as word of the battle's outcome spread. The initial reports had been met with disbelief, then demands for confirmation, and finally stunned silence, as the reality became undeniable. Admiral, we're receiving priority transmissions from every major government. Yu reported. The Vraxian High Command wants immediate tactical debriefings. The Centauri Collective is requesting detailed battle analysis. Even the Resonants are asking how we achieved quantum torpedo phase shift technology. The galaxy that had dismissed humanity as a minor military power was suddenly desperate to understand how such a small fleet had accomplished the impossible. Military academies throughout known space would spend decades studying the Battle of Helix Nebula, trying to comprehend tactics that had revolutionized the very concept of space warfare. On the Vraxian homeworld, Ambassador Kethmar sat in his private chambers reviewing the battle recordings for the 15th time. The same ships he had mocked as a toy fleet had demonstrated capabilities that made his empire's massive dreadnoughts look like obsolete museum pieces. The quantum torpedo strikes that phased through armor, the impossible maneuvers that defied known physics, the coordination that allowed hundreds of ships to fight as a single entity. None of it matched anything in Vraxian military doctrine. His aide, a young officer named Veltar, entered with the latest analysis from their military scientists. Ambassador, our tactical experts have reached their preliminary conclusions. The human victory was not luck or favorable circumstances. Their entire approach to space combat is fundamentally different from ours. Kethmar gestured for the report with one of his long arms. As he read through the technical analysis, his expression shifted from confusion to concern and finally to something approaching fear. The humans had not just won a single battle. They had revealed military capabilities that made them potentially the most dangerous species in the galaxy. Schedule an immediate meeting with Admiral Kim, he ordered. The Vraxian Empire wishes to discuss mutual defense treaties and technology sharing agreements. Similar conversations were taking place throughout the galactic community. The Thalassan Collective called emergency sessions to discuss how their bioships might be upgraded with human-style AI integration. The Centauri had already begun drafting proposals for joint military exercises where they could learn human tactics firsthand. Captain Boram Choi was leading damage assessment teams through the disabled Devourer vessels when she made a discovery that added new dimensions to humanity's victory. The enemy ships were not just military vessels. They were mobile civilizations that contained the absorbed remnants of dozens of conquered species. Admiral, we're finding survivor pods throughout the Devourer fleet, she reported during a secure transmission. These aren't enemy crews. They're prisoners from civilizations that were conquered years or even decades ago. We're looking at refugees from 17 different galaxies. The implications were staggering. The human victory had not just stopped an invasion, It had liberated millions of beings who had been trapped within the Devourer collective for generations. Many of them possessed knowledge and technologies that had been thought lost forever when their homeworlds were consumed. Commander Wanjie Seo coordinated the rescue operations using the same stealth ships that had crippled the enemy command network. His teams moved through the massive Devourer vessels, locating survivor compartments and evacuating beings who had given up hope of ever seeing freedom again. "We've identified representatives from over 40 different species," he reported. "Some of them are from civilizations that were conquered before our galaxy even knew the Devourers existed. The information they possess about enemy capabilities and tactics could be invaluable." Lieutenant Yoonji Nam worked with the rescued survivors to piece together a complete picture of the Devourer threat. What she learned explained why the invasion force had been so confident and why humanity's victory was even more significant than initially realized. "The Devourers have never been defeated before," she explained to Admiral Kim. "In 17 galaxies and thousands of years of conquest, they've never encountered a military force that could match their collective intelligence and coordination. We didn't just beat them, we did something they thought was impossible." Rescued survivors confirmed what human intelligence had suspected. The Devourer fleet that had attacked through the Outer Rim was just the advance force of a much larger invasion. Behind them came hundreds of additional fleets, each one comparable in size to the force humanity had just defeated. But the psychological impact of the defeat was spreading through the Devourer collective faster than their ships could travel. For the first time in their existence, they had encountered a species that was not just resistant to absorption, but actively superior in combat. The quantum communications networks that connected their scattered fleets were filled with confusion and something approaching fear. Captain Yujin Han was conducting post-battle analysis when her corvette's sensors detected new hyperspace signatures at the edge of the system. For a moment, the human fleet prepared for another wave of Devourer attacks. Instead, they found themselves facing something unprecedented: Devourer ships arriving under flags of truce. "Admiral, we're receiving transmission from the approaching vessels," Communications Officer Yu reported. "They're requesting permission to negotiate surrender terms for their entire collective." The message that followed would reshape galactic politics for generations to come. The Devourer collective, which had never negotiated with any species, was offering complete surrender to humanity. They wanted to discuss terms for ending their invasion, not just of this galaxy, but of all the star systems they currently threatened. Admiral Kim's response was measured and careful. "Tell them we'll consider negotiations, but only if they provide proof that all invasion fleets have been recalled and all captive populations released. Humanity doesn't negotiate from positions of weakness." As news of the surrender offer spread throughout the galaxy, the transformation in how other species viewed humanity became complete. The same ambassadors who had assigned humans to the least important patrol duties were now requesting audiences to discuss defense partnerships and technology exchanges. Captain A. Young Bayek was analyzing the quantum communication networks that had carried news of humanity's victory to Devourer fleets throughout the known universe. Her scientific instruments detected massive changes in enemy movement patterns as entire invasion forces turned back from their targets. "The psychological impact extends beyond just the fleets we fought," she reported. "Devourer forces that are light years away are abandoning conquest operations. They've never encountered organized resistance before, and they don't know how to respond to the concept of military defeat." The final phase of the Battle of Helix Nebula was not fought with weapons or tactics, but with words and negotiations. Humanity found itself in the unprecedented position of dictating terms to an enemy that had conquered 17 galaxies. The species that had been laughed at for their small fleet now held the fate of countless civilizations in their hands. Commander Hyun-Woo Lim was present when the formal surrender documents were signed aboard Admiral Kim's flagship. Representatives from across the galaxy witnessed as the Devourer collective agreed to release all captive populations, withdraw from all conquered territories, and submit to monitoring by human-led peacekeeping forces. "The age of conquest is over," Kim announced as he accepted the surrender. "From this point forward, the galaxy will be protected by those who understand that true strength comes not from size or numbers, but from intelligence, cooperation, and the willingness to defend those who cannot defend themselves. The ceremony was broadcast throughout